Welcome back to the exciting conclusion of You're All Doomed, where we slice and dice our way through Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, 13 minutes at a time. I am your host, Brian.
And I'm underwhelming surprise, Greg.
This chunk begins with the hockey-masked killer standing in the barn and ends with our familiar favorite Paramount logo. So Tommy showed up in the barn, and Reggie, the relieved, is very happy to see him. Tommy and the hockey mask killer are having a stare down. Tommy can't believe what he's seeing. He starts to have flashbacks, understandably, and he starts hearing his sister's voice of telling, kind of recreating the moment that he killed Jason in a final chapter. But he's so dazed by what is going on and all these voices that he's hearing, he doesn't even notice the killer slash down at his chest with the machete and just knocks him to the ground.
Yeah, it's crazy. He's so overwhelmed by memory, even though he's the one who showed up in the door of the barn, that he allows Jason to march close enough to him to do this damage. I know I mentioned this last time, but I keep harping on it. You can see the eyes beneath the hockey mask, and it just makes this guy look like he's just wearing a Jason costume.
It takes a lot out of it.
It's really stupid. But Tommy goes down with this machete wound to the chest, which allows Jason to set up for a killing blow.
But Tommy is able to pull out the knife that we saw earlier in the movie. He pulls it out of his pocket and stabs the killer in the thigh. And for some reason, Tommy decides to join Pam and Reggie, who are up in the rafters of the barn, even though he's hurt pretty badly. So instead of leaving the barn, they decide to go up in the barn.
Yeah, they go further into the barn. Jason follows, not all that hampered by what looks to be a pretty nasty leg wound on the inner thigh.
Yeah, and I figured, okay, if they're going up on the rafters, maybe once they get up there, they'll at least kick the ladder down so Jason can't follow them. But he is right behind them, and he has absolutely no problem getting up into the rafters. So I'm not exactly sure what they're thinking going up there.
Yeah. Once he reaches the top, Jason finds Tommy's body limply laying on the floor. I guess Jason assumes Tommy is already dead because he dismisses it and begins looking around in the loft for his next victims. Reggie is half-assed cowering behind a bale of hay, so Jason immediately spots him and moves in that direction, which allows Pam to attack Jason from behind with an axe handle. They duel a little bit and manage to make their way over to the ledge that leads outside. Pam is kind of on her back foot, and she looks down and sees this kind of strange bed of spikes on the ground below.
It looks like it's probably something that they use to keep bales of hay in place. They kind of stack them up on this spike, perhaps.
Could be. Just as Pam is about to get hacked by Jason, Reggie leaps from the beams overhead and knocks Jason out of the opening toward the spikes below.
Pam and Reggie walk over to the ledge to make sure that Jason went over, only to find out that he didn't. He's hanging on, and he reaches up, and he's able to grab Reggie by the leg and is in the process of trying to pull him over the ledge with him.
Yeah, Pam and Jason have a little bit of a tug of war with Reggie. Jason doesn't have a whole lot of leverage here because he's dangling over the edge of the building, but this commotion wakes Tommy up. Apparently he was just unconscious from the pain of his chest wound. So he comes over with the machete and hacks Jason's arm. This naturally dislodges Jason's grip and sends him reeling backwards onto the spikes below at last.
As he's tumbling down onto the spikes below, we do see his hockey mask kind of falling off on the way down. And this is where some questions are raised. We get a close-up look at the now unmasked killer, and it's nearly impossible to see who it is because there's a latex kind of bald cap covering everything except for the face, and so there's some frayed edges of this latex mask, but even the exposed part of the face, we only linger on it for a few seconds. But I remember watching this movie as a kid and having absolutely no idea who we were looking at.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, even, we've seen this movie multiple times now, and I know who it is, and watching the scene because of the rain, the lightning, the frayed remnants of this latex mask. I mean, it looks a lot like Matt, but we know he's dead.
Yeah, we have this huge reveal where we knew it wasn't Tommy because Tommy showed up at the barn. we now know that it's not Jason because they're clearly wearing a mask. And so this is supposed to be this big shocking moment of like, oh my God, it's not the person you thought it is. It is. And you're just like, well, who is it? Because I don't know who it is. Who are we looking at? Please tell me.
Well, it's pretty bungled from a shocking reveal standpoint, but regardless of who it is, the quote unquote Jason of this movie is now dead. We can say that the stunt person who portrayed the hockey masked killer in this movie was Tom Morga, a guy with a lot of background parts and stunt work, particularly for the Star Trek franchise. So he's been in a lot of Paramount stuff before this. He was also uncredited as Michael Myers in one scene of Halloween 4 and as Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So
wow, that's quite the trilogy there.
Exactly. He also did stunts in Jaws the Revenge. In the opening scene of this movie, it turns out that dream sequence Jason was played by John Hawk, who Tom Morga selected as his fill-in. He was not available for the shoot that evening. So a couple different people played Jason at various times in this movie, but throughout all of Tommy's other flashbacks at Pinehurst, Tom Morga did play, he considers that he played real Jason because it was the original red streaked hockey mask. And even though Jason was perhaps more a ghost than anything, Tom Morga likes to say that he did still get to play Jason.
After getting the close-up of whoever the hell that's supposed to be, we cut to a hospital waiting room.
Yeah, where a nurse is filing her nails impatiently as Pam and Reggie catch their breath on a bench. This nurse seems particularly perturbed because perhaps she'll be late for her shift at the strip club.
Yeah, she's got some serious nails on her.
And some serious makeup, and yeah, just not what I think of when I think of the health profession, necessarily.
Deputy Dodd shows up and sits down next to Pam, and he tells Pam that the killer was Roy. You might remember Roy as the skittish paramedic from earlier in the film who did not like the sight of butchered Joey. They know this. They know it was Roy because they found a wallet on the killer. I love the fact that this guy is going around killing people and he's carrying his wallet,
his ID with him.
But there's some weird contents within the wallet. First of all, there's a picture of Roy himself. I don't have a picture of just myself in my wallet, but Roy does, so that helps to clarify whose wallet it was. And I honestly believe the only reason that picture is in there is to remind the audience who the fuck Roy was.
I think you're absolutely right.
Because if the cop's just like, oh, it was Roy, you know everyone in the theater is like, who's Roy? And so they flip to the photo and they're like, oh, that guy? Oh, all right. Cool.
Okay.
All right. So he's the killer. So we know he's Roy. But what's his motive? Well, apparently there's also a picture of Joey in his wallet. And Joey was the boy that was hacked to death by Victor at Pinehurst. And we learn that Joey is Roy's son.
Yeah, he's Roy's secret son.
I have another question about the contents of the wallet, because if Roy was an absentee father and Joey's mother died, how does he have a current photo of Joey in his wallet? Who gave it to him?
Yeah, and why does he take such an interest in this boy, but not enough to be his legal guardian?
Yeah, like I'm going to carry a picture of my loving son, but I'm not going to pay any attention to him or talk to him or spend any time
or
with him.
admit that I'm his father or anything. Yeah, it's a baffling Scooby-Doo level plot with masks and interfering kids and all sorts of it's just cartoonish, garbled, and a waste of time, frankly.
Yeah, and even the cop doesn't know why Roy didn't tell anyone that Joey was his son. Apparently, Roy was a bit of a loner and never really talked to anyone, not even the paramedics that he worked with. But when he was called to the scene at Pinehurst and saw that it was Joey hacked to pieces, it must have set him off. And his motive for these killings was to kind of mimic what Jason had been doing all those years previous. And we know this because Roy's also carrying a bunch of newspaper clippings about Jason Voorhees, including one that has a photo of Jason in his hockey mask
that no one on Earth could have taken and survived.
It's like a paparazzi shot of Jason out in action.
But it's a close up in the sense that Jason does not appear very far away from whoever took this photo. Jason is clearly looking at the camera, so has noticed someone taking his picture. And unless it's security camera footage from the hospital where Axel and Nurse Morgan were murdered at the start of part 4, there wasn't even time for anyone to take Jason's photo. He was running around Higgins Haven when he got the hockey mask. No one there had a camera. No one there took a picture of him. He killed almost everybody there. He was laying dead in the barn, so no one could have taken a photo of him standing up wearing the hockey mask. He was then in the hospital in the freezer in the cold room until he murdered Axel and Nurse Morgan, whereupon he promptly returned to the Crystal Lake area and killed the Jarvis, killed at the Jarvis house and the party house. No one there had a camera. And at the end of that movie, he was killed by Tommy. So again, no one could have taken a picture of him standing up unless, as we mentioned in the first episode of this season, perhaps there's a lost Jason Voorhees movie that takes place between the final chapter and A New Beginning, whereupon someone during a rampage that we have yet to learn about managed to take a photo of Jason Voorhees.
Yeah, there's like a body of a high school newspaper photographer laying on the side of the road somewhere, and he happened to snag a picture of Jason before he was murdered, and Jason didn't think to confiscate the camera afterwards, and so they picked up the camera from the body. But there's no. Yeah, this is literally 1 second of the movie where we see this little newspaper clipping, but you have to stop and go, well, wait. Where did this picture come from? Who took the picture?
Who managed to survive taking this photo? The ridiculousness of this mugshot of Jason aside, I really still just don't understand Roy's plan. He's grief-stricken by the death of his secret son Joey, but and so he's driven to a murderous rage, but still has the presence of mind to understand that he needs to conceal his crimes by pretending to be Jason Voorhees, who rampaged through this area 5 years earlier. Why would he be sane enough to want to cover his tracks and yet be murderous and psychotic enough to murder all these people who had nothing to do with Joey's death?
Yeah, he went to great lengths to pretend to be Jason Voorhees, yet he evidently drove his ambulance to all of these killings and had the lights on. Yeah. So he wasn't exactly being discreet about it. The MO is just very bizarre, and I don't know if it's really... I guess it would just spook the locals enough that they would just assume that it was true and that it really was Jason, and why would they even think that it would be the paramedic? But it's just not very well thought out. It's a very bizarre motive.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is the kind of thing that, given where this series unfortunately decides to go in future episodes, there's probably some fan fiction explanation for Roy seeking to imbue himself with Jason's supernatural evil. He seems a little bit harder to kill here than a normal human being might. I don't know that I would get up after being hit by a bulldozer or stabbed in the leg with a pocket knife. So, yeah, I don't really like this answer at all. I like the rest of this movie well enough, but this undermines it completely for me.
And even if you just take out the Jason element of it, when Mrs. Voorhees went on the killing spree to avenge the death of her son, it made sense. You can understand it. But Roy's an absentee father. He has absolutely no role in Joey's life. So that's not to say that he can't love Joey, but he doesn't love him enough to spend any time with him, but he loves him enough to go on this murderous rampage to avenge his death. It just doesn't track.
Yeah, and like Pamela Voorhees took it out on camp counselors because she kind of lumped all counselors together. Jason's original drowning death in 1957 was supposedly caused by counselors making love while he was swimming. So you can see where she might project that anger upon anyone who's a camp counselor. Joey was killed by Victor, who was arrested and taken away by the police for this murder. So there's a very concrete person to blame for Joey's death. That Roy could seek revenge against Victor all the livelong day, but I don't understand why he goes against everyone else, including, I mean, Duke was a jerk, but Duke had nothing to do with it. I mean, he was
right.
callous and unfeeling, but
there's some unnecessary collateral damage. Like Duke, maybe it was the only way that he could get the ambulance was to kill Duke. So it's like, okay, fine. But Gramps, what the hell did Gramps do?
Yeah.
And then Anita and Demon, they had nothing to do with Pinehurst or any of that. So like, it's just, none of it makes any sense because there's no pattern. Like you could justify it if it's like, he followed a very specific pattern. It's like, well, he only killed people that were crazy at this thing, and he has a problem with crazy people. Like, okay, fine. If that's your reason, then whatever. But he's just all over the place.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that perhaps he objected to Victor being brought to Pinehurst. He knew that Joey was there. He probably kind of, secretly watched over his long-lost son and may have, expressed concern that an anger management violent offender Victor is being brought to the same place where his gentle son lives, but his concerns were ignored, and so he blames Pinehurst for his son's death because they disregarded his warnings. But again, he has played no role in Joey's life. Joey was not aware that Roy was his father. Joey may not have even been aware that Roy existed. So it doesn't really hold up at all.
So it's pretty clear that this scene was just kind of thrown in because the scene of Roy on the spikes wasn't satisfying enough to explain who the person was, who the killer was, and why they did it. So they threw this in, and we get this explanation. Fine. Tommy is in a hospital room, and Pam decides to go check up on him to see how he's doing. As she nears the bed, Tommy produces a machete and stabs Pam in the stomach, and he's laughing and cackling while he's doing this, but it's just a dream.
Yeah, once again, Tommy bolts awake. He is indeed in a hospital room, but he's by himself. The storm continues to rage outside, and he now has another hallucination of Jason. This time, Jason is standing at the foot of Tommy's bed. Instead of reacting with fear as he has in the past, Tommy seems more resolved to his fate and lays there staring calmly at Jason, who fades before our eyes like an apparition.
The biggest difference between this vision that he's having and the other ones, like you mentioned, was that in the past, Tommy has always tried to shake it off, or he like rubs his eyes or just kind of like tries to get it out of his head. But in this time, he just stares him down and he doesn't blink and he doesn't back down. And he's just like, no, I'm not going to let you win anymore. And so he just stares him down. And then, like you said, just gradually just disappears. And so we're like, okay, here we go. He's rid himself of this, Jason horror.
This specter. Yeah, he doesn't try to fight it this time. Once the apparition of Jason has disappeared, Tommy tears out the intravenous hookup to his arm and gets out of bed. I noticed that the ki ma 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 is playing in the background, but curiously it morphs into ki ta 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 ta. So almost the kill 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 mommy 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 becomes kill 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 Tommy Tommy Tommy. He opens the drawer next to his bed and pulls out Roy's blue-streaked hockey mask.
We then see Pam standing outside of Tommy's hospital door, and from inside the room, she hears glass breaking. So she immediately rushes into the room to see that the window has been smashed and, the wind is blowing out. And as she's staring at the window, trying to figure out what's going on, the door slowly closes behind her to reveal Tommy in his hospital gown, wearing Roy's hockey mask. We zoom in and we see him raise up a knife.
And that's where the movie ends, with Tommy wearing a hockey mask, brandishing a rather large kitchen knife. Apparently kind of ending in the same place where we were meant to believe that the previous movie ended.
And once again, we're dealing with something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because aside from apparently setting up another movie with another killer, we just saw Tommy rid himself of the visions of Jason, which we would suggest that he's moved on from this encounter with Jason and he's kind of victorious in that standpoint. And then he responds by donning the hockey mask that Roy was wearing and preparing himself to kill Pam, a woman who did nothing but try to help him. So it's like we're given this like satisfying scene right before where Tommy is bettering himself and moving on from this tragedy, only to begin this new life as whatever we're supposed to believe.
That's interesting because I didn't interpret the previous scene that way at all. I can see where you would, but I kind of saw it more as the Jason hallucinations were a manifestation of Tommy's psychosis and the murderous rage that he was somehow infected with by killing Jason many years ago. And this was not so much him ridding himself of those tendencies, but more of him absorbing them into himself and coming to peace with them and truly embracing the dark side that he's now infected with.
So rather than him being haunted by these visions of Jason were more implying that this was the road that he was going down, and he was trying to fight them off like, no,
Yes.
I'm not turning into Jason. This is not what I want.
Exactly. And so the scene moments ago was him embracing the fate that he's, destined to have.
Okay.
But
almost like absorbing the energy, like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. And so that's why he dons the mask and is now gone full on crazy, let's say. This brings us to the end credits of the movie. And there's really only one that jumped out at me from the crew. Stunt coordinator Dick Warlock. He was the one who was responsible for bringing Tom Morga in to portray Jason, the masked version at least. Dick Warlock has been involved in tons of movies, especially a lot of John Carpenter's flicks. But most notably for me, I'm pretty certain that he played Hooper in the underwater shark cage sequences of Jaws. So that's kind of cool. In the cast, there are a couple of people that we haven't discussed yet. One was the young man who played Vic, the rage-fueled person who killed Joey with the axe. He was portrayed by Mark Venturini, who did some TV work and also starred in Return of the Living Dead, so had a little bit of a horror niche going for him. Sadly, he contracted leukemia and died at the age of 35, all the way back in 1996. And while we've covered the person who portrayed the hockey masked version of Jason in this film, it's now time to talk about Roy. He was played by Dick Wyand, a veteran of TV and commercials, who went on to become a celebrity photographer. He wasn't particularly proud of his involvement in this series, although in later years and after several appearances at fan conventions, he's softened his stance a bit more, and he did appear in the Crystal Lake Memories documentary, and seems to be a good sport, even though he wasn't thrilled about this initially.
You might remember our friend Axel from the morgue in the Final Chapter movie. His last name was Burns, and there's a lot of speculation that he is actually Roy Burns' brother, which would make him Joey's uncle.
Oh, interesting.
Doesn't really help Roy's motive anyway, but it's an interesting connection that I never knew about until doing research for this movie.
Tommy was portrayed by John Shepard, who appeared in The Hunt for Red October and Down Periscope, so it sounds like he's carved a submarine movie niche for himself. He also appeared on Friday the 13th, the series, so he's one of only two people who crosses between both the feature films and the television show that wasn't exactly a spin-off of the movies. He is friends with an actor and writer named Michael Hitchcock, who you might remember from Best in Show and a couple of appearances on Party Down. And it was actually Michael Hitchcock who convinced John Shepard to take this part. John was struggling with whether or not to accept the role because of his religious beliefs and what he knew these movies were like. But Michael Hitchcock convinced him that, he's not really... He's simply portraying a character. He's not actively harming anyone or, violating his personal beliefs. So John Shepard embraced the casting and actually spent some time preparing for this role by working at a state mental hospital. Pam was played by Melanie Kinnaman, who also played, quote, the woman in Best of the Best.
With Eric Roberts.
With Eric Roberts. I guess I'll watch that, but like, is she the only woman in that movie? I don't know why that's credited that way. She also had a rather humorous uncredited appearance on an early episode of Saturday Night Live, portraying Cheryl Ladd's chest on a skit involving some sort of battle of the network TNA. It's pretty funny, and it's on YouTube, so you should take a look. And later on, she played a German spy for several episodes on General Hospital. Reggie the Reckless, as we've mentioned, was played by Shavar Ross, who played Dudley on Different Strokes, including that very special episode that is painful and unnerving to watch now. He since went on to establish an entertainment company that distributed inspirational content, and as of 2017 had established an online education program designed to teach people how to begin making money with an online retail business. He also pursued a degree in psychology for a time. I'm not sure if he's put that to use since then, but that's the last recorded information I've got on Mr. Ross.
In 1996, I saw that he, after completing Bible school, he founded the Alive Church, which was a non-denominational Christian church in Los Angeles, and was its pastor for 4 years.
Oh, good for him. One final thing in the credits that jumped out at me. Apparently, Nike and Converse both contributed sneakers to this production. With all the running around, I guess they needed some footwear.
I wonder what pair Reggie was wearing when he tripped in the kitchen, because I'm sure they were not too thrilled about that sponsorship opportunity. Like,
Yeah.
no, you would never trip in our shoes.
Yeah, Nike says it's Converse, and Converse says it's Nike.
Well, I was hoping for an exciting conclusion to this movie, but what I ended up with was a dud.
A Dudley?
Right. So whether you like it or not, Roy is our killer. And who knows where this series is going to go next. At the end of the final chapter, we thought Tommy was going to be the killer. And once again, we're being told that Tommy is going to be the killer. So we'll see where this goes. But that pretty much wraps up Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. So thanks for joining us this season. We look forward to diving into the next chapter of this franchise. Until then, I have been Brian.
And I've been Greg.
And you're all doomed.
All doomed.